Cool. So yeah, we can just keep chatting until people come in. It was funny. We had Austin Gill on a couple last week, and so we were joking that, well, not really joking, that sometimes drama will get more views. And so we went live, and I was just like, "What are you talking about?" Just to try and stir stuff up.
Nice.
But it's always funny too when James isn't here, because you'll see a bunch of people in the chat say, "Where's James? What are you
They're
guys
like,
doing here?"
he's not here. He's like, I'm gone.
Yeah. He said he was going to try and poke his head in the chat.
Cool.
And then it really confuses people, because if I comment from StreamYard, it broadcasts out as James. And so people are like, what? Where'd he go?
Nice. Did you tweet this? Like, where's that?
I
live?
did not tweet it, but you are more than welcome to. And I can send you
What's the
here. I
link?
have the social graphic. I'll stick this in the. Give me just a second. So there's two places we are broadcasting to. There's a private chat in StreamYard, so that's where this is going. This is going on YouTube and on Twitch, so you can catch it either place. And I will also send you on Twitter the social graphic. If you want to send that out, you don't have to, but that's
cool.
also an option. Fun times. Eric, are you working on any enhancements on your app?
Mostly, it depends on which app. On one of my Twitch extensions, I am redoing. I redid the API, moved it away from serverless, and moved that into my Elixir app using GraphQL. Nice. And then I'm redoing the entire front end hosted portion of that to just like it's in React, and redoing the design using it's a GitHub based prod app, so I'm using GitHub's design system, and then
fun.
Yeah, and then redoing that whole workflow. That app's like almost 4 years old that I haven't touched, so it needs a little bit of a refresh. It's my least popular app.
Okay,
it's good to practice.
That's fun. And I love that you had the perfect answer. Depends on which app you're talking about. Oh man. At least they're in production. I have so many, like a graveyard of unfinished projects.
There's either unfinished projects or outdated or severely outdated projects. You gotta go. You get one or the other.
Yeah. Well, I'll save this question, but Brandon, one thing I want to ask you is, one thing that I think about a lot is like, what should be my project? Like, what should be the thing where I invest my time? And so, like for you, don't answer yet. I'll wait until we go live. Actually,
you want me to answer? Like, what do I need to spend my time on?
No,
my current situation, or
sorry.
do you advice for you?
Well, like just in general. So this is it. I'll phrase it again when we actually go live. Yeah, because like I have all these ideas, and I'm like, what if we did this, or what if I did this project or this project? And for you to say, okay, I'm gonna go all in on flight control. This is where I'm gonna hedge my bets and invest my time. Like, what? I'm curious, what made you think that this is the idea that I'm gonna go after? This is what I'm gonna pitch. So obviously you had some backing that probably helped at some point, but
it was hard work to get to that point though.
Yeah. Okay, so I think people are still trickling in, but I'm just going to go ahead and go through like the pre-show stuff, and we can go ahead and kick the conversation off. Awesome. So welcome to another episode of Compressed FM, a podcast all about web design and development. Today we are joined by Brandon Bear, who is a CEO of Flight Control, or the CEO, not a CEO. And we also have my teammate from Zeal, Eric. And so I'm happy to have you both on the show. Thank you for coming.
Hello. It's good to be here.
Hello. Glad to be a guest.
Awesome. So I'm super excited about this conversation. Brandon and I have crossed paths a couple times, both at Magnolia JS last September, I think was the first time. And then, oh man, we've bumped paths several times.
That conference.
That conference, yes. So when we were specifically at that conference in Austin, I sat down with Brandon and grilled him on Y Combinator. And so I was like, I wish I had recorded that conversation. So some of it will be rehashing those questions. I'm just fascinated by Y Combinator and how they run their whole program. But even just the business that Brandon's created is very fascinating. So I'll include links to Flight Control, and you guys should definitely check it out because it is a fantastic service. So Brandon, do you just want to start there and tell us exactly what Flight Control is?
Sure. So Flight Control is like Heroku or Vercel, but on your own AWS account. So, traditionally you've had the option of deploying straight to AWS, which is, like gives you infinite flexibility and power, but as we all know is like very difficult. It requires a lot of like skills, and it's just a real pain. Or on the other side of the spectrum, you can use something like Heroku or Vercel, which is very easy to use, but you have this big trade-off of losing control, higher cost, less flexibility, and typically companies will end up outgrowing those and then have to migrate out to AWS. And I was like, I demand that good developer experience. I have to have it. But I was also needing more control of using AWS stuff. I was wanting to use some of the AWS native services because they're so good. And I was like, why can't we have this good developer experience on my own AWS account? And so that's really what kicked us off.
That's awesome. So one of the questions I was kind of teasing out earlier is, how do you decide this is the thing that you're going to build? Like, I have so many different ideas and I haven't hedged my bets on one idea or the other. How do you decide this is going to be the thing that I'm going to invest my time on?
So much of what I do is intuitive. Like, definitely like there's things I can reason about of like why this might be a good idea or whatever. But like intuition and faith ultimately is like really what kind of decides what I do. Like I've wanted to have my own software company for like 10 years, like a long time. And so I've been working towards this, and I was like working on little things on the side. I had an iOS app that got up to like $5,000 in sales per month, and sold it after a year for a little bit of profit. So, and then I was like working on some other stuff, but I knew that like none of those were like a big thing. It was like almost like something just to keep me busy while I was growing, gaining more experience and more maturity, and then like coming into, like that right idea, which like there's debate. Like sometimes people are like, oh, don't wait for like the best idea, like just do something, which is kind of what I was doing. But at the same time, I wasn't like going all in on it.
So at what point did you get Flight Control 2 that you decided to submit to Y Combinator?
So I had created Blitz.js, which was kind of a detour from starting a business because it's an open source project. But it was an absolute blast. Like building that, it was like I could feel like the significance of it, and I had to do it, had to try it, and like see how big I could make it. And it like really got tons of traction and did really well. And it was through that I realized that I really loved building developer tools because I'd never done it before. And I was like quite good at marketing them, I was never planning to start a dev tool company until I started Blitz and like realized like, okay, I guess this is my thing. And so it wasn't long into that when I already had the idea for Flight Control, but I was still busy getting Blitz off the ground. And I needed a co-founder. And so it was like beginning of last year. So it was like a year. It was like a year. Wait, beginning of last year. Sorry. It's hard to keep track of time. So it was like a year after I started Blitz. Whenever I met Mina, my co-founder online, and we just like hit it off. Like he is like the best co-founder ever. And so that it was what really like gave the solidification of like, okay, what are we actually doing here? What are we going to call the business? What are we building? And like, how are we going to go about doing that? And like one of those was we needed funding because neither of us have these big, massive pile of savings that we can just ride off into the sunset with.
what was the so you decided we need funding and did you know like Y Combinator was going to be the place you're going to apply for, or did you kind of like look around? Because I know the VC space can be a little very, very, very cutthroat.
Yes. So we were starting fundraising around June, middle of the year. And I thought it was going to be pretty easy because of my like past, somewhat success with Blitz and all of this stuff. But it turned out to be extremely brutal. And it was like 3 months of just like banging my head against the wall. It was made extra difficult because we did not have a product yet. We also were like really kind of murky about what we were building. Like we were not good at communicating it. And we didn't even really have a super clear vision ourselves. We're just like, developer experience. Like we're just going to have a good developer experience. And we're trying to raise it too high evaluation. So going back, I think I like probably could have gotten some funding just by like lowering all those expectations. And so we are basically almost to give up on getting like a significant amount of funding. And we just kind of like applied to YC as like a Hail Mary, like whatever. Like I'd applied twice before, didn't get in. So I had very little hopes for that.
When you applied before, did you apply with Flight Control or did you apply with
other
okay.
bad ideas?
Funny. So I'm curious, what does the whole pitch process look like? When you go to a VC, what are they looking for? What do you send them? What does that look like?
I mean, it depends on the stage, but we'll talk about early stage here. They place a lot of stock in the founder and really like how good the founder, like how much you can convince them that you're smart, that you're capable. So you either need to like have some credential that you can point to, like, okay, I was at this prestigious school, or I was at this prestigious company like Fang, or I did this project or this company, and or just like really good at telling stories and convincing them that you are capable of it. So they need to know who you are, like what you're building, and like some kind of proof that you can actually build what you're trying to do, and like your vision, where you're going to go, and whether they think it can be a big, like $1 billion company.
Mm-hmm. So you said you met Mina online. What did that look like?
So we were both in a bootstrapped entrepreneur community called Mega Maker. Okay. And it's a cool community. And so we kind of knew of each other through that, like for a few years, but never like talked directly. And then he like helped just a tiny bit in the early Blitz days. And so we kind of were aware of each other, but then it was like, I had been talking around this deployment idea on Twitter, but like not directly. And it was one day I decided like, okay, this is it. I'm actually going all in on this. And the very next day he DMs me on Twitter out of the blue. And it's like, hey, I'm thinking about building this deploy to flight control thing, deploy to AWS thing. Do you want to partner on it? I'm like, what is happening?
The stars are aligning.
Yes.
Awesome. One of the things that, go ahead, Eric.
Oh, I was just going to ask, like once, I'm not just too soon, but I was asking like, okay, so you get accepted to Y Combinator. They give you, is it like, what's it like? I'd imagine it's not, here's money, go make money. What's the structure like for Y Combinator once you do get accepted and you have your idea?
So the YC application is very simple to submit. So backing up a couple steps, YC application is very simple to submit. I recommend everyone, like if you're starting a business, just try it. And then the next step is they invite you to a 10-minute interview, and then they decide later that day. And so I was super surprised when we got invited to the interview. It turns out we were like one of the earliest to interview, which means we were a top pick already, and we got in. And that was what really made the difference for our fundraising. So within a week of getting accepted into YC, we had raised $1 million in total. So like that was just like the light switch, because we didn't come from Fang. We didn't like have all of these other things. And so YC was that stamp of like, okay, these people are somebody.
Yeah. So when you find out that you were accepted, do they send you an email? They give you a phone call?
call.
What does that look
Yes.
like? A phone call. Okay.
Acceptance is a phone call. Rejection is an email.
Oh,
And so that evening, you're waiting all day, like what's going to happen? And then that evening, I got a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. I was like,
Oh,
oh,
no.
maybe this is it, but you don't know. Like maybe it's spam.
It
So-
reminds me of like the Nobel Peace Prize, where like they like the people like have to awake like at 3 a.m. here in the States
Yeah.
because they're waiting for that call to see.
oh my goodness. So, what did that look like? I mean, after they call you, before you had that like, oh crap, we've got to build this now moment.
I mean, we were all in. Like either way, we're gonna make it
That's
happen.
awesome.
One way or another. Which I think you kind of have to have. Like
Mm-hmm.
you can't just be like, oh, if we get some money, then we'll do it. Like VCs will tell quickly if that's how you are.
Yeah.
So it was a few months until the program started, but it's a 3-month program, and they have weekly events. They have like successful YC founders come in and speak to you, like the Airbnb founders, and so forth. And you meet with your YC partners regularly to like share your status updates but it's like they don't actually put much pressure on you. So they basically just ask like, what do you want to do? Where do you want to go? Like in 3 months at demo day, like how much revenue do you want to have? How many customers? And then they help hold you accountable to that.
Mm.
So it's a very chill relationship from that respect, that
That's
they're
interesting.
not like beating you over the head. It's
Mm-hmm.
really just up to you what you want to do.
So, do the guidance and the resources that they provide, is that set? Like, are you working through a curriculum, or is that based on where you are with your project? Or
It's
company?
pretty set. So the 3-month program, they have it split out of like, okay, like week 1, this is what you should be reading in their like, in their like education, in their content stuff for you. And it's also like what should you be focusing on in your business, week 2, week 3, etc.
Okay.
Do they also set you up with that relationship, because you're trying to do a direct integration with AWS? So I would imagine that they also kind of connect you with whoever you need to be in contact with the AWS in order to drive that conversation.
If they can, yes. In the case of AWS, you do have special AWS partners just from being in YC. But we actually we used them a little bit, but not much. Like, most of the stuff is, we don't need special AWS people. Like we did like have them review some of our designs and stuff, but it wasn't too much.
And you guys just went through a whole new design review, working with a design company. What did that process look like?
Yeah, so me being an engineer has designed all of our product up until now, and it works, but it's not winning any design awards. Some people will give it compliments, but other people will come by and they're like, it seems not finished. I'll go somewhere else until you finish it. And so we end of last year kicked off a all new branding exercise with an agency called Overnice out of Berlin. They did Prismus branding and also GraphCDN, now called Stellate. And so they've done our new branding, our logo, which is done. They've designed our marketing website and all new dashboard, like UI, UX. And so most of that is done, and we're in the process of building now. So this is going to be really huge. This is going to really take our entire like design stuff from, scrappy YC startup to like, holy cow, like what is this company? Like
Nice.
there's spaceships in the UI and stuff. Like, okay, I have to try this out.
So, what
That's
did
a-
that process look like with them? Did they, were you going back and forth with them? Did they submit like 3 different mock-ups and you decide what's your favorite?
So it was like probably a month of iteration on kind of the brand direction. Like there was a bunch of different kind of, they interviewed us and then came back with several. It was like, I forget, it was a number of different
Okay.
design directions that we could go. And so we kind of iterated on that until we kind of had the general direction. And then was working on the logo. And then that kind of just sort of extended into the product.
Awesome. Eric, were you going to ask something?
I know, I was just agreeing. earlier.
Yeah. Yeah, awesome. Yeah, and if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask them in the chat. So, cool. So what has been the process of like implementing those things? Did they give you Figma files and then you're using that in your code?
So they are helping us with the build.
Oh,
So
really?
they're actually building the entire marketing website for us,
Okay.
and they're building the entire component library design system, like the React
Interesting.
components.
Okay.
And so, yep, they're doing all of that, and then we are taking those and adding them into like the actual app.
That's awesome. What's the tech stack for the marketing site?
Next.js and React.
Oh, I thought you were gonna say Blitz.
Well, so Blitz is
Yeah,
a
that's right.
toolkit for building full stack applications.
That's right. That's
So
right.
it which is mainly like authentication and a type safe API layer, an RPC API layer. And so you don't need either one of those for a marketing site.
Yeah, true. True. Have you played with the Next 13 app
Yes.
directory and the
Yes.
server
So
component?
our new dashboard is being built from scratch, brand new Next.js 13.4.1, whatever
Okay.
the latest is,
Uh-huh.
with server components. So it's a bit of a learning curve. We're still
Yep.
working on it, but I'm quite optimistic about them. There's two kind of key benefits that they give in my mind. One is being able to load data directly in the component on the server. So it's sort of the same concept that we did with Blitz, where you don't want to have to write an API endpoint just to render data. So that's one nice thing. Another really big one is it just reduces the amount of JavaScript sent to the client. So server components the JavaScript for a server component is not sent to the client. So like we're used to in the past, like server-side rendering, it would render everything on the server, but then it sends all the JavaScript to the client, and then it has to hydrate the entire page on the client. But the server components, there is no hydration. Like there's literally no JavaScript on the client. So one way you can kind of think about this is in the past with React, we've had container components and like presentation components. And the container components would get the data from somewhere and then pass them into the DOM presentation components. And so now we have this same sort of, separation, but you have server components and client components. And the way to think about them is data components that are on the server and interactive components that are on the client. And so you basically, all the components are server components by default until when you need something interactive. So if you need like a use effect or an on click or any of those sort of client side interactive stuff, that's when you add use client. And so these client components are actually rendered on the server too. So it's a little bit like tricky to get your mind around, but it's helpful to think of data components that have no interactivity, and then interactive components are where you put in the use client.
That's a great use case. Eric, have you used that at all?
I haven't yet. I
Okay.
mean, I haven't used React. I've used that concept with you because of Elixir with Phoenix,
Sure.
because they do live view, server rendered, inject it back, coming back, and there's so much more benefit and performance with that, and SEO friendly too.
Yes, that is huge. Yeah, I've have a project that I've been working with on Next 13, and the hard part is I am embarrassed to admit I didn't even know this was the thing. When you pass data from the server component to the client side component or use client component, it has to be a plain object. And this just kind of goes back to knowing the JavaScript primitives, but a plain object cannot have nested like objects of how we normally think of JavaScript objects. And you also can't have like getters and setters on there. And so I had a little bit of frustration when I first started of feeling like I had to reformat all of my data in order to pass it over to the client side component. The hack thing, which feels a little sloppy. And so, I mean, if you guys have a better recommendation, but was to convert it like to the JSON stringify, and then you parse the JSON back once you are in the client component to be able to work with it instead of having to reformat everything. But, and it could just be the system that I was working with.
What does it do for dates? Do you have to stringify dates?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't think I'm doing a lot with dates, actually.
'Cause I think they're doing some automatic handling of things like dates. I'm not sure,
Okay.
but definitely not. I doubt they are with classes.
Okay.
So we're still early in this. I'm sure we're going to encounter more things like this.
And I'm also curious if things have changed at all with the new release because they just moved it out of beta and said that everything's stable. So
Nothing major. I think it was just like some additions of some of the important hooks, like use selected layout segments or something like this,
interesting.
that are helpful for like doing active links and things.
Okay. Are you doing anything with their nested layouts?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Basically everything is like nested layouts. So it's very different. It's much more like the traditional React way of building apps where it's just like one big app. There's not like these separate pages. You know, like the old Next.js pages directory really kind of like went back to the old way of like, oh, you have these different pages and they're each one is like kind of rendered from scratch, unless you do some really hacky stuff. So this is, now it's like people who learned React with Next.js, they're like, wait, what is this? And we're like, oh, this is the right way to, this is the old school way to write React, like how it's supposed to be.
It's funny how things swing on this pendulum of, hey, we're going to put everything on the server. Oh no, we're going to throw everything over the client. Oh wait, the server was good for some stuff.
Yeah.
It just all goes back and forth. There were a few things I wanted to ask you. This is kind of maybe backtracking a little bit, but you talked about flight control. So why flight control? Why not just go straight to, say, AWS? Or on the other side, why not go to Vercel or Heroku or Netlify or any of these other services?
So I touched on this a little bit in the intro, but it's really like you previously you had to decide between the trade-off of good developer experience or having control and ownership and having the raw power of AWS. And so, you know, these AWS wrappers like Heroku, Vercel, have clear benefits, but they also have these trade-offs of more expensive, you lose control. Typically they're less reliable because there's an entire custom layer of infrastructure between you and AWS, and everybody's traffic is going through that. Like all Vercel's traffic is going through their custom layer of infrastructure. And so, you know, but on AWS, like if you're using your own AWS account, you have your own servers, your own infrastructure, your own CDN, like whatever, and there's no one else using that infrastructure, and so it's much more reliable, and oftentimes you can get better performance as well. And so we're trying to remove that trade-off and give you the best of both worlds with flight control, where you get that good developer experience, but it's also on your account where you don't have to go into AWS console if you don't want to tweak anything, but it's there when you need it. And the question is when, not if. You know, eventually as your business grows, you're going to need some custom stuff. And either like we can help you with the DevOps stuff, like we're kind of like an outsourced DevOps team, or if you have your own DevOps team, then you can just, you know, go in there and do whatever you need.
So do you spin up like an instance of flight control for each customer?
No. So we have our flight control servers are running in our account, and they just manage the automation and the control. And so whenever you get push, we get a webhook from GitHub, and we'll go get your code and then put that code into your AWS account and trigger the build and deploy inside your account. So we're like kind of a sidecar to your account where we just automate all of the infrastructure and all of the DevOps. And so this is a replacement for, like traditionally you would use Terraform or CDK or CloudFormation for managing your infrastructure. But with flight control, you don't have to touch any of that. Eventually we'll add like plugins so that you could hook those custom stuff up if you wanted to. But yeah.
That's
So
interesting.
so when I was deploying my own app to AWS, like it was just a huge mess, and like the only way I could think about making it really easy is I leaned on Elastic Beanstalk, which was still slightly less
No.
complicated. So so instead of me figuring out, so that the idea is like I don't want to go with Heroku because Heroku just is way more expensive. I don't go with AWS because AWS is way too complicated. So flight control kind of is right there in the middle, but it makes it easy for me to deploy, so I don't have to figure out how to use Elastic Beanstalk, Fargate, or anything like that.
Exactly. So like our server deploys to Fargate and ECS. And so like those are probably new terms if you're not familiar with that. But that's fine. Like you don't have to understand what those are to deploy an app and run it in production with flight control. But over time you'll learn that. And then you can, you'll be able to go in and customize like the auto scaling rules. You can like really fine tune those to make sure it's like, works really good for your app. Unlike on something, some other platform where you don't have that ability to really fine tune the experience for your users.
Very cool.
Do you want to talk at all about some of the new features that Vercel just released? So they have, trying to think, storage and cron jobs and
Those things. Oh boy.
those things.
Are they really their features?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what is it? It's wrapping what, Neon? Is that right?
Yeah.
And
Upstash.
uh-huh.
Yeah. Um, so I think it's great. A lot of people have been wanting Vercel to add databases and all this stuff. I think if anyone on Spin on Twitter, they've seen that like they mark up the price like 2x or something, like something
Mhm.
significant for like basically no added value. Like it's okay to mark something up if you're adding value, like totally that makes sense. But when you're marking something up significantly for like no extra value, it's like, okay, why are we doing this?
Yeah. So I'm gonna assume you guys have had that stuff built in if you're just building on top of AWS.
Yeah. So we have RDS as the database and Elasticache for Redis. And so those are easy things. You just add to your flight control config and you're off to the races. We're actually using PlanetScale in production for our
Oh,
database,
really? Interesting.
which is, we love it.
Interesting.
Yeah, I
Um,
was taking a look at your website, and it looks like even like if for the personal developer, they could get started on flight control, and then
Yes.
configure AWS from flight control really easily, so that they can utilize like the lowest cost possible. So instead of using like Vercel or Heroku's RDS, which they're just wrapping and adding like $25 to it, you can use AWS's RDS pricing, but have a really easy kind of Heroku-esque experience with setting it up, right?
Yes. Yes. Although at the moment, the things that the services Flight Control offers are more production quality ones. And so the minimum price ends up being something like $12. Let's see. Actually, with the database, probably like $25 a month AWS cost. So it's not extremely cheap on that end. Flight Control itself is free for individuals, but you can get AWS credits quite easily, like going through Startup School or something else. And we actually have this in our docs, like a number of ways to get those.
Yeah, I was just noticing that. I was like, wow, okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's great.
So we're going to add more cost optimized stuff in the future, like deploying everything to like an EC2 instance that can be like really cheap. And then also serverless options we'll add also. And since those scale to 0, like that can be, good for the lower end of the spectrum.
So I'm gonna show my hand here. I do not know a lot about AWS. The panel is super confusing to me. So it does sound like flight control would be a great place to start, but where should you get started?
How to get started with AWS?
Or no, with
Um,
flight control. Like if I was just
oh,
like, I'm gonna use you guys, where should I get started?
so go to flightcontrol.dev, click the like create account button or sign up or whatever button there is, and you will connect your GitHub account, and then you will probably you can select one of our presets, like an XJS preset or Rails or Redwood or something like that. And but if that doesn't meet your needs, you can just click add a server, add a database, define your build command, start command, or if you're more advanced, you can bring your own Docker file. And so it's quite simple to get started. Very similar to what you'd be used to with Vercel, Railway, Heroku.
Okay. Very cool.
Looks like we do have a related question on that. So Nibby in the chat asks, like, how does Flight Control access AWS account via VPC or something else?
So Flight Control IAM. So IAM is the AWS Identity Access Management, and they have a thing called Assume Role Access that allows our account to access your account directly. And so that is one of your setup steps. Is you'll click a button in your account that will give access to our account. And so there's no shared keys that we have to store or anything. It's literally just a setting in AWS that links our accounts together.
That's nice.
Yeah.
From a business standpoint, so we're going to shift gears a little bit. You mentioned you're not writing code anymore or as much. You're managing more people. What does that transition look like? Because I know some people love it, some people don't.
So this had been like a little over a year ago, that I was like the only front end. So it was Mina doing the back end stuff. I was doing the front end stuff, and I was supposed to be building front end stuff, but like there was just like I was doing other stuff that had to be done, and like there was actually not much front end stuff being built by the time we hired actually my brother as a junior dev at the time. And so it was like a relief, like finally like stuff is actually getting built. But overall, like I'm more than happy for someone else to build stuff, because I've just like moved up a layer of abstraction, and now I'm like building a company, product and a company. And so I'm still building, I'm still doing all of the engineering like stuff, but now instead of just a system of code, it's like this multi-dimensional system of code and people and economy and users and like all of these things. And so it's more challenging, but it's also like requires more creativity also.
Go ahead, Eric.
I was gonna say, like, how was the transition going from coding to more managerial? Was it an easy transition? Did you have to like cut yourself off from looking at code or being a hawk over everything?
So it was definitely a learning curve, because I had never been a manager before. I'd never hired anyone before. I'd never like been a CEO before, right? So it was definitely like some bumps along the road, like burnt someone out, was able to like revert that, learn how to like, oh no, like, and learning how to do like one-on-ones with people. Also had a huge learning curve on learning how to hire. It's like just fell flat on your face, and then like, wait, well, that's not working. Like, okay, like what do we actually need to do here? And so basically when something like that happens, is like, okay, step back, starting at first principles, like, and really like design the whole thing from scratch. So like, okay, we weren't actually really clear about what kind of role we wanted. And so we need to get like really clear about what do we actually need? What do we want? And then, so that helps us, to know who to get or who to look for. Write a job description that is like, not just copy and paste from like some big tech startup or whatever, but like actually like think about the person that you're trying to attract and like who we are and what makes us special as a company, and like write that out, like pour our heart out, like, like show them who we are, and like and talk in a way that they're actually going to like engage with. Turns out is very effective. And then like the hiring process, like designing an application that is not just like whatever normal questions you've been asked before, but like, what do I want to know about that person before getting on a call with them? Okay. Like, like these are the requirements that we have of like, whether it's like excellence or like a growth mindset or these things. And then so ask creative questions that will bring that out. And turns out that's also very effective.
So But I'm curious what a question would be like if you wanted to see, do they have a growth mindset? How do you engineer that question?
I think for that one, our question is something like, what are you learning? What's something you're learning? You know, and some people would be like, ah, nothing.
You're like, okay,
And
noted.
other people are like, oh yeah, like
Yeah.
this and this and this and this. And you're like, okay, yeah.
So we
Okay.
get a lot of people that are like, you know, that are looking to get hired, that are new to tech, trying to land their first job. What, you know, with that growth mindset, what would you recommend? Like, as you looking at the resume, what do you recommend them to do? What to, like, should they be building something? Should they have apps? Like, what piques your interest to give you the idea that they have a growth mindset on paper?
Definitely not the resume. So if
Good.
you're applying to a job and the only thing you can do is send a resume, I feel very, very sad for you. It's all of the answers that
Very
we like
sad
ask
for you.
in the application that really helps me like see who they are. It's like, okay, well, why do you want to work here? You know, like tell me about your experience with like your engineering experience, or tell me about your DevRel experience, like whatever it is. What's something you enjoy doing outside of work? Let's see what else. Yeah, I forget. I should have had these ready. But overall, like mainly for someone new to the industry, I'm looking for excellence, and this really applies to every role that we hire. Is really looking for excellence, because even if you don't know something, some skills or whatever, that's fine. You can learn if you have excellence. So if I can tell that you have attention to detail in your things, and you're curious, you're wanting to learn, you're asking good questions in the interview or even in the application or whatever, that's definitely a good sign.
Cool.
That's good. So are you looking, like when you're talking about excellence, are you looking at a portfolio or previous projects that they can cite? Are you looking at code?
That would just be part of it. It's just like
Okay.
in general, like, I mean, it comes down to like, do you care about how you look, how you dress?
Mhm.
Like it's really like excellence to me affects every part of your life. And it'll like, as you're interviewing someone through the application process, you can kind of pick that out. Like, are you like just very wordy and just like ramble on and on and on? Like, okay, that's like, there's a lot of things that like, and we're not demanding perfection, right? But it's
Sure.
like, these things become really important. And if there's things that, you know, like kind of rub you the wrong way a little bit during the interview process, it's just going to be worse, like working with them, right?
That is so true. So true. So one of the things that you mentioned is, since you've hired people doing one-on-ones, what do your one-on-ones look like when you're conducting them?
So I have weekly 30-minute one-on-one with each of my reports. And I have this set of questions that I ask every week that they should answer red, yellow, or green.
Okay.
So it's, how is your personal life? And they don't have to share beyond just the color if they don't want to. But it's important to know, like, okay, is there like something big, you know, happening in your personal life? That helps me like have more grace or whatever for, missing something at work. So how's your personal life? How is your stress level with work? How do you feel about your productivity? Let's, how do you, or how much are you learn, how much are you growing? And I think there was one, maybe that was all. I think that's all. And so those are like a good, pretty much will uncover almost any issue. And you know, like if you're stressed, like, okay, maybe it's something that we just need to help you on your, like how your mindset and how you're thinking about it. Or like maybe we're like, we as leadership needs to change how we're doing something. And so that's worked pretty good.
I love that
There's
red,
a-
yellow,
Oh yeah.
green.
Two other things.
Yeah.
Are you worried about anything?
Oh, that's good.
And then do you have any constructive or positive feedback for me?
That's good too. For anybody that's getting into management or interested in management, I've read a couple of books that have been really helpful for me. I have 3 people that report to me. So there's one, Julie Zoe. I guess that's how you say her name. She was a designer at Facebook, now Meta, and started out as one of their first employees and then kind of became a manager by default because she was there one of the longest, longer than any of the other designers that they had. So she wrote a book called The Making of a Manager, What to Do When Everyone Looks to You. And that she kind of fell into that role. And so she talks about that, and that's been really good. And then there's another one that I read. I'm going to have to find it, but it's about coaching through your one-on-ones that I've really enjoyed. It's called The Coaching Habit. Say less, ask more, and change the way you lead forever. And really talks about ways that you can be curious with people. And a lot of times it's not what you say as a manager, but the questions that you ask to get them thinking about what to do, what they need to respond. It's not, and even as a manager, it's not always your job to solve it, but to empower them to be able to make those decisions themselves.
That's excellent. I think being curious is super important for leadership. Really, anyone. Like for example, like people that are standing at a booth at a conference. Like I hate it whenever you walk up and they just like start like, spewing out whatever stuff on you, and they have no idea at all like who you are, what stack you're using, what your problems in your company are, or whatever. They just start unloading on you and like, wait, like no, like please ask me questions, learn about me, what challenges I might be having, and then fit your thing into that if it makes sense. And the same thing with one-on-ones. It's just like there's so much that you can learn. Like I always learn the most when I get curious. And like if somebody says something and it's easy to just like go into the next question or whatever, but you can ask like why. Like if they say, oh yeah, like I don't know, I'm pretty happy. Well, like, pretty happy? Or like why pretty happy? And then like you'll like find some more information. And so that's super, super good.
Yeah, one of the questions that they say is like, tell me more. Oh, that's interesting. Tell me more. Yeah. And they have said, even as somebody, like when you're talking to somebody and you're not sure what to say next, and you're like, oh no, what did I say? But just that tell me more, it not only buys you time, but a lot of times it allows them to go deeper on that thing and then cover another layer of the onion and then another layer of the onion. And you'll eventually get to the point where they're like, I think that's it. And then okay, if they can't go any deeper on there, now you can take a different path or ask a different question.
Yep.
Do you have any other leadership tips and tricks that you use as you're leading a team?
I think the foundation that you just really have to have is unconditional love and care for other people. And just like
that's not something you
genuinely caring about them as a person.
Yeah.
I think is really kind of what makes all the difference.
Yeah. There's
and like they say, people leave managers, not companies.
Yes. Yeah, true.
And people stay for managers, not for companies.
There's a question in the chat that said, how much did your Y Combinator experience contribute to your management skills, hiring one-on-ones, leading, etc., versus the product launch and marketing?
I'm not sure how much it contributed to any of those. Like one of the big things that contributed to was just focusing on the most important things, like the 3-month focus period. This kind of really helps sharpen your focus on like the business fundamentals and the things that you have to do. And you kind of like pick up these like clues and things from the people who are coming in and sharing, like successful founders and whatever. And so I didn't directly learn like about hiring, even though I listened to some sessions about hiring and was taking notes, but then it still didn't like sink in until I like went and tried to do it. And then I went back and like dug into all their materials. And so I'm still doing that now. Like, and so there is a lot of content there that's helpful even after the program.
Oh, that's interesting. So they continue to provide support for you?
So we have access to all the resources, and then the entire network, and we can still meet with our partners if we want to. But I found that they're not as helpful after the program is over, because they're sort of in that like 3-month like grind like phase. And once you exit out of that, you have to start thinking about how to like become more sustainable and like look more longer term. And they're just less good at that since they're on their day to day. They're focused on the 3 months.
Interesting. Cool.
So what does the team look like now? You started with 2, and now how many are there?
We have 6 full time and 2 summer interns. So eight total, which is just wild. It's super fun. So we have 3 full-time engineers, 1 full-time developer advocate, and then a full stack engineer intern and a DevRel intern.
Is this your first time onboarding interns to the company?
So yes, the one intern was part-time since December, maintaining Blitz part-time, but now he's full-time on for the summer. But yeah, it is first time full-time interns. But we did bring on a brand new junior a year ago. So that's not too far away from an intern. In fact, these interns have more experience, quite a bit more experience than the junior did.
Are you still working with your brother?
Yes.
Awesome.
Very
Yes,
cool.
he's doing very well. Yep.
One of the things that I heard you say, I think I heard you say this, so correct me because I can misquote you. You were talking about like you didn't want a founder until you found the right founder. So I know that founders can be a lot like having a marriage in a business relationship. So were there certain qualities with Mina that you're like solidified the deal?
So I think the big things were we were just super aligned on like personal core values. And then also we were really aligned on business vision and like the product idea and like how we wanted to build a company. And really like kind of how we want to show up in the world is very aligned.
Has it been hard to split responsibilities?
No, it's been super easy. Like, at least from my side. Yeah, I think like we work very well together, and yeah. I mean, there's so much work to do. It's not like you have any turf wars of like, oh no, this is I want to do. Like, either one of us are more than happy for someone else to do to do something.
Yeah, that's great. And where's Mina based out of?
Toronto.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's fun. That's fun. So are you guys set up? I think I can ask this. Are you set up as an American company or a U.S. company or? Okay.
Yeah, we're U.S. incorporated, but global remote. So me and my brother are here in Ohio. Mina is in Toronto. And then we have folks in Mississippi, Texas, Cincinnati, Ohio. So actually not too far away. And India and Spain.
Okay. Has that been
Alright.
hard working globally?
No, not any harder than just like working. Like, so I'll say this much. I would love to have everyone in an office. Like there's definitely more magic you get being in the same place. But there are trade-offs. Probably I wouldn't be able to work with all of these people because they wouldn't or couldn't move to a single location.
Sure.
And then it's harder to like travel or whatever. Like there's a lot of benefits to being remote. And so what we do sort of like to get in the middle is we try to get together 4 times per year in person. So 2 of those are a week-long officially designed retreat where it's more like a retreat style where we're just a lot more intentional about everything that happens. And then the other 2 are just informal get-togethers, like maybe at a conference or something. So about a month ago, we were all at React Miami
Nice.
at the conference, and so that was super fun. And these times are just so important for building that shared context. Like I still like know like friends and stuff that haven't met with their team like in like years, and I'm like just like, oh, poor team.
Yeah. So
and-
was this like because you talked about early on like you accidentally burnt out a developer and all that type of stuff. So was this already part of the values of the company, or did you figure this out that people need to be in person in order for things to work?
I think from the very beginning, we were always like, yeah, we're going to do retreats and we're going to get together in person. And that was really like highlighted by the fact that, so Mina and I started the company without meeting in person. It was like 6 months after we incorporated, maybe more, that we actually met in person.
That's awesome.
And when we met in person, it was just like this, like I don't know, like fireworks. Like we got along good before that, but then it really helped. Like I especially me, have tended to come across differently in video than like in person. And so like he like kind of liked who I was on video, but then when he saw me in person, he was like, whoa, okay, this is actually a cool person. Like, so I've since had to work. That's something I've had to work on, and like trying to, like be more of myself on video instead of just the focus, like get work done. I'm here at work. Like in person, I'm just super chill, whatever. But something about the screen and the camera that just really sharpens my focus.
I think Mina's in the chat, and they confirmed that yes, you're correct. It is easy on side as well. So awesome. Is there anything else you want to talk about that we haven't talked about yet?
Maybe one last thing we could talk about around deployments is conversation around servers versus serverless.
Yeah, that's
I think
great.
this is
topic.
something a lot of people like kind of face. I think one of the worst things around this conversation is companies who only support one or the other. And so if a company only supports one, obviously they're going to try to push that thing on as many places as they can, even if it's not necessarily best for you or your business or your app. And so I think serverless versus servers is a trade-off that's you need to make for your own situation and your own app. So the benefit of serverless is that it scales to zero. So if you don't have very much traffic, then it's obvious benefit. But if you're a larger company, like that's probably never going to scale to zero. So who cares? Serverless has a cold start issue. So that's a negative. And so a lot of people find that their application feels much faster running on a dedicated server. But dedicated servers can also have auto scaling. And so maybe not as smoothly as serverless functions. But most apps are not actually scaling wildly on a day-to-day basis. And so, I think that ideally, like in work where we kind of want to work towards with Flight Control, is making it super easy to switch your app between like servers and serverless. And so like maybe you can even deploy your preview environments as serverless functions, because they're like, you don't really care about cold starts that much. They shouldn't be running most of the time. And then maybe they just, so basically you want to be able to test both and see like what's more effective from cost perspective and performance.
Do you provide any of that information in the dashboard?
So our new dashboard that's being built right now will display live AWS cost, and CPU and memory, those sort of things in auto scaling. We don't have serverless yet, but we will be adding serverless functions.
That's awesome.
Yeah, serverless is one of those things that's people don't fully understand. And then there's also, I was having a conversation with someone else, and there's also the idea of durable serverless, where it's like you just deploy your serverless functions to a hosted instance, and it just invokes you're using it in that way. But yeah, people don't understand the cost benefit. And I know recently there was that article about AWS like remove serverless from their video transcoding thing, and serverless is dead. It's like, no, it depends. Right?
One of the best use cases for serverless is like background processing, like where you're just like events, that you're firing events and you don't care about cold starts in that case because it's in the background, and maybe it's not that often, or it's like bursty, and so that's a good use case for serverless functions. But a lot of times people find that the user-facing request they always will feel faster on a dedicated server, just because of that cold start issue.
There's a
Well-
question in the chat. Go for it, Eric, if you want to read it.
So are there any roadmap plans to expand beyond AWS into Google or Azure?
Yes. So, but probably not for a couple years. We're really focused on trying to go deep before we expand. And so going deep with our current feature set in AWS means like just really refining the heck out of the daily user experience, and just making it like really good. I think one problem that so many startups make is they get some traction and then they just start expanding, adding all these new features and new like whatever, expanding horizontally. But then like the core like experience sort of stagnates and doesn't keep getting better. And so we're trying to combat that and work on really getting that, really iterating on that core user experience a lot before expanding.
Makes sense.
Sorry, this is going to be a little bit behind the scenes. There's a question in the chat about James having a podcast. So we're actually recording a podcast live. You can check it out at compressed.fm. I tried to respond, but for whatever reason, YouTube is not taking my my messages, saying rejected.
So I got one final question. So if you have an existing app, so I have an existing app. Everyone always has an existing app. Is Flight Control is it really easy to transition and move my whole infrastructure and use Flight Control instead of using Heroku or whatever it is?
Great question. And the answer is a big yes. In fact, most of our apps deployed on Flight Control started somewhere else. So it's very easy to migrate them. If you need extra help, like migrating production app, as far as like migrating database and all that sort of stuff, we're very available to help assist with all of that. So it's quite common that people will, start on Vercel and they hit their enterprise plan way too quickly, and then it becomes too expensive. Then they switch, or they like start a hobby project on something like Railway, and they're like, okay, when I'm ready to go production, then I'm going to go to use AWS. So there's a lot of like switching, and it's quite easy to get set up.
Very cool.
Sweet. Well, if you guys are good, we're going to go into the next segment of the episode, and this is our Picks and Plugs section, where we pick something that we like. It doesn't have to be tech related, and we plug something generally that we worked on, but it can be anything. So, Brandon, do you have any picks and plugs for us?
Yes, I would like to plug buying your own airplane.
Oh, if only I had the budget for it. So
Are you
Brandon
talking
is
about
also
like
getting
paper
his
airplane?
yeah. Well, and right now I'm getting inundated by these ads on Twitter that's like it's like a plastic airplane that you can like throw against the ground and it'll like fly all over the room. But Brandon, you have your pilot's license, right?
Yeah,
You're not
since I was
not
17.
just working on it. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah,
So
I just bought my first airplane.
Did you really?
Like a month ago.
Wow.
How exciting. You've arrived.
Yes, there are pictures on my Twitter.
Awesome. Include a link. Can I ask this? Is the gas crazy that you have to buy for it?
So the avgas that I pay for here at my own home airport is like $5.75 a gallon. And my plane cruises at 230 miles per hour at about 23 miles per gallon. So which is like, it's quite rare for this speed and whatnot. It's super efficient.
That's awesome. So are you just like flying all over the place now?
Yeah, like I'm going to Atlanta this weekend and Miami for conference on Tuesday. As long as the weather holds out, I'll be flying myself.
That's awesome.
Sounds very cost effective.
I know.
Actually,
right?
it is. It is. So it ends up being about the same cost as airline. But usually I can get there quicker because there's not nonstop flights from Dayton.
And you also can just like get on the airplane. You don't have to worry about the queues or I think I'll leave now. Are you going to be flying the flight control team around anywhere?
Maybe someday.
That's awesome. What about a plug? Do you want to plug like your Twitter, flight control? include links to all those
I
things.
plugged Owning Your Own Flame.
Oh, I
Okay.
thought that was your pick, but you pick and plug the same thing.
They're two different things. Okay. Okay, sure. I'll plug Flight Control.
Okay.
Flightcontrol.dev. Try it out.
Perfect. What about you, Eric?
For my pick, I recently started watching the show Silo on Apple TV Plus. Great science fiction. Yeah, I mean, all those a lot of the Apple TV Plus shows are great, but it's another really good mystery and all sorts of good stuff with that.
That URL looked crazy. I tried to send it through.
Oh, the SEO like thing.
Yeah, sorry about that. What about a plug?
I don't know what to. Oh, that's right. I remember now. Actually, for password manager, was it Bitwarden? I actually plugged that over LastPass. I transitioned from LastPass to Bitwarden for. You can just Google LastPass and you'll see the many reasons why. And it was really smooth, really easy export. And then the other thing I love is your password authenticator like codes and stuff like that are integrated with Bitwarden. So you don't have to have a separate app. You can in your browser you can go and just click on it for the login. And it's open source, which is even better. Yeah, and it's a good price. So if you're looking for a LastPass alternative, Bitwarden.
Awesome. So for my pick, this will be kind of fun. I'm gonna pick this. It's called Peeps. And this is let's see, there's a little brush on the end and a glasses cleaner. So you pull this out and then you can clean your glasses with it. And this does a fantastic job of cleaning your glasses. And it's a lot better than the little fabric thing that you get. Stick it in your pocket, stick it in your bag. So I've enjoyed Peeps is what it's called.
Peeps?
And yeah, Peeps.
Okay.
And then I'll include a link. And then for my plug, I'm going to go ahead and plug the Learn, Build, Teach Discord server. So this is a server that James runs. I'm a moderator in it. But if you are just getting started, or even if you're an experienced dev, it's a great place to connect and also get your questions answered. We have all kinds of fun in there. So be sure to check that out. If you go to learnbuildteach.com, it will automatically redirect you so you can be added to that server. So we would love to have you. And Brandon, we really appreciate you joining us today, and Eric, you being a co-host. So lots of good knowledge and learned a lot. So for now, that's all we got. Okay, so that's
Bye.
Oh yeah, that's the end.
Bye.
And then we'll do a good Midwest goodbye and say goodbye to everybody else. Actually, I don't know if Jason is still in the chat, but he had said that you talked to Zeal a long time ago.
He mentioned like you were doing a stint working out of your RV, I think it was.
Yes. Was Zeal like a potential client? It could have been.
I don't know.
I don't know. I don't remember.
It sounds like it was years ago. Very memorable. That's funny.
But the RV part is right. So.
Do you still have your RV?
I guess they had a conversation right before you went on mobile RV office mode.
That's cool. We have another teammate that has built his own camper inside his truck and has modded a lot of stuff. That's been really cool to
and has
see that.
Starlink too.
Yeah, he put Starlink on.
Nice.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks for everybody for hanging out in the chat and the questions that were asked. And I know the real James popped in momentarily, but we will be back next week. I can tell you, probably gonna, but actually I'm not gonna say who it is. We'll just leave it as it's a mystery. You'll have to come back. So next week at 11 a.m. Central. But I'm just gonna go ahead and end. Thanks everybody for hanging out with us. See you next week.
Thank you.